We begin our story today with a wide shot of a windswept grassland. In the distance, a lone hawk circles lazily overhead. And on the horizon, the eroded face of an ancient cliff seems to stare out over the endless plains. There is a strange kind of beauty to these empty spaces, but also a strange kind of sadness. And here you will find another phantom of the grasslands, the cheetah. And like the others we've discussed, the jaguar is a phantom of the wild. Except instead of haunting the mountains or the grasslands, the jaguar rules the rivers. These big cats are the silent guardians of some of the world's most fragile ecosystems. They move through the grasslands, mountains, and rivers with an otherworldly grace. And although we can rarely see them, their presence reminds us that the natural world is full of mystery and magic. So the next time you find yourself in one of their habitats, remember that you are walking in the footsteps of ghosts. In the dense jungles of South America, jaguars are known as the river ghosts. And once again, their ghostly reputation comes down to their ability to be perfectly still in the water. In many ways, the jaguar is the perfect ambush hunter. Its spots allow it to blend into the dappled shade of the forest floor. And because it is such a powerful swimmer, it can sneak up on its prey without being seen. Just imagine a jaguar paddling through the water, its muscles rippling beneath its spotted fur. Its eyes are fixed on a troop of capybara that are drinking along the river bank. In a matter of seconds, the jaguar will burst out of the water and end their lives with a quick bite to the neck. No one will hear them coming, not the birds in the trees, not the monkeys swinging through the vines, and certainly not the capybara. The jaguar is the ultimate aquatic assassin. And yet it is just as deadly on land. And this is what makes the jaguar truly ghostly. On the river, it's nearly impossible to detect them because they move so silently through the water. On the land, their spotted coats allow them to disappear into the shadows. And even though they are the third largest cat in the world, they are rarely seen by human eyes. Like the snow leopard, the cheetah is also a master of stealth, but for an entirely different reason. You see, the cheetah is built for speed. Perhaps there are various pressures that favor lone hunters, such as the need for large territories or a solitary lifestyle. But surely it can't be a coincidence that three big cats have evolved to hunt alone. So why do big cats hunt alone? Well, it all boils down to risk and reward. When it comes to hunting, the biggest risk is injury. A wounded animal is vulnerable to infection and cannot properly defend itself against predators. And perhaps surprisingly, a large proportion of injuries happen during mating season. Most of the time, big cats are able to avoid fighting each other, but sometimes two males will compete for the right to mate with a female in estrus. These fights can go on for hours, and the loser will often walk away with a nasty injury. In some cases, a single injury can mean the difference between life and death. Take, for example, a male tiger who was gored in the skull by a rival's canine tooth. The wound became infected and spread to his brain, and he died soon afterwards. Clearly, then, any behavior that reduces the risk of injury will increase an individual's chances of survival. And for big cats, that behavior is solitary hunting. The reason why is simple. When you hunt alone, you never have to worry about getting injured by a member of your own species. And this trade-off between risk and reward also applies to raising cubs. A mother jaguar, for example, has to feed her cubs for several months before they are ready to hunt for themselves. During this time, she has to carry her cubs with her everywhere she goes and make sure they eat. The problem is that cubs are cute, fluffy balls of energy that don't understand the dangers of the outside world. And jaguars are naturally curious. That means there is always a chance that one of them will wander too far away from the mother and become lost or even get killed. The way around this is to keep the cubs close until they are old enough to fend for themselves. But if a jaguar wants to hunt, it can't do that with a couple of rambunctious kids in tow. And so once again, the decision comes down to whether it's better to hunt alone or raise cubs alone. For jaguars, the answer is clear. A mother jaguar has a better chance of survival if she doesn't have cubs. But without her constant care, those cubs won't make it to adulthood. The solution is to find a mate and take turns looking after the cubs while the other hunts. But this arrangement only works if you trust your partner. And trust is a risky thing in the wild. If a female jaguar decides that her partner isn't pulling his weight, she can simply leave and take the cubs with her. Or if a male decides that a female isn't producing cubs fast enough, he can force her to mate with him every day until she is pregnant. And so once again, the decision comes down to risk versus reward. Is it worth taking the risk of losing your cubs or your life? For most big cats, the answer is yes, because living alone means they don't have to worry about being killed by another member of their own species. And so in the quiet corners of our planet, these ghosts continue to stalk their prey. It is the fastest land predator in the world. But as any fan of the animated series will tell you, being fast is not the same thing as being strong. And that means that if a cheetah catches its prey, it only has a split second to deliver the killing bite. This makes stealth absolutely vital. And that's why cheetahs are always on the move. They spend most of their days lounging around, trying to conserve energy. But once they spot prey, they have to creep closer before making their move. And since they rely on speed rather than strength to capture their food, they must get within just 10 meters before they strike. But while the cheetah's predatory technique may require stealth, it is actually quite rare for them to hunt alone. In fact, they typically hunt in groups of 2 or 3, which may sound odd considering that each cheetah needs a huge amount of space to roam. Their territories can stretch for hundreds of square kilometers. And that means that 2 or 3 cheetahs may cover a combined area of more than 600 square kilometers. And it gets even more complicated because cheetahs are also fiercely territorial and will defend their patch of grassland against intruders. With all this in mind, you might wonder how cheetahs manage to share the hunting grounds without getting into fights. Well, as it turns out, each cheetah knows its neighbors and respects their borders. Of course, this type of coexistence only works when the cheetahs aren't competing for food. If there's been a drought and prey is hard to come by, then fights are much more likely. And during times like these, cheetahs will often drive other cheetahs off their land in order to secure their own food supply. The price of solitude, therefore, can be very high. Sometimes it means defending your home against rivals. Other times it means having to leave your home in search of food. For the cheetah, the choice is clear. It's better to be alone than to fight tooth and nail with other members of its species. And so once again, we have to tip our hats to the cheetah. It may not be able to take on a rival male in a one-on-one fight, but on the open grasslands, it is one of the most fearsome predators alive. There are no sounds here to break the silence except the whisper of the wind, or so it would seem. Because in this place, there are ghosts, and they move like phantoms across the landscape, almost invisible, almost silent. They are big cats, and though their numbers have dwindled and their habitats shrunk, they remain solitary by nature. And so they hunt alone. And when it comes to big cats, few animals are as ghostly as the snow leopard. And yet that very elusiveness has made it one of the world's most revered creatures. It is often called the ghost of the mountains, and for good reason. That's because the snow leopard is mostly found at high altitudes in Central Asia where few people live and fewer still dare to venture. They are perfectly adapted for life up there in the cold, thin air. In fact, they can survive in some of the harshest environments on Earth, from the dry, arid plateaus of Mongolia to the rugged Himalayas. And because they live in such remote places, we know very little about them. But what we do know is that they prefer to be alone. Much of the time they are masters of disguise, melting away into the rocky terrain like watercolors on old paper. What little we see of them tells us that they are sleek and muscular, perfectly suited for pouncing through the rough terrain. Even their paws have adapted to help them navigate the steep slopes and loose scree slopes of the high mountains. Each one is marked with a rosette of fur that looks a lot like a jaguar's. And their fur coats are so thick and warm that they don't need a winter coat. All this makes the snow leopard a perfectly wild ghost. They spend much of their lives hidden in caves or rock crevices. They hunt by stealth, creeping up on their prey before leaping onto it. And in just seconds, their deadly grip can end the life of even the largest blue sheep. So if you're ever wandering around the mountains of Central Asia, keep your eyes peeled for these ghostly hunters, because in spite of how well they hide, they are still out there. Now, for a moment, let's shift gears from the high peaks of Asia to the grassy plains of Africa. But there is one big cat that rules the grasslands with even more power than the cheetah, the jaguar. At this point, you might think that the patterns we're seeing here are simply a matter of chance. When you think about it, there is a strange kind of beauty to their lonely existence.